Hey everyone, and welcome into FCC Talk. I'm your host, John Ranchton, the family minister here at First Christian Church, joined today by the great Chris Gregg, senior minister here at First Christian Church. Chris, how you doing today?
I'm great, John. How are you? Thank you for introducing me as the great because I'm great today.
I just knew you were doing great, so I wanted to make sure everybody knew that. I'm doing well myself. Had chapel this morning for the first time in a while since Cornerstone is back in
Yep.
session, and it was nice. So, you took your grandkids to school today?
Took the grandkids to school. Been praying for all the kids, as parents and buses and teachers and administrators and staff of all types are heading back to school today. It's a different world.
Exciting times. I pulled in and I was like, it's definitely back to school day because the line was long going around, and I was like, all right, here we go.
Dodge the traffic in the parking of the church parking lot.
Exactly. Well, hey, everybody, if you're watching on YouTube, please do like and subscribe. We appreciate it. If you are listening on podcast, please do subscribe there as well. That way you get the notification every time we send out a podcast, whether it is, one of CJ's Worship Uncoiled messages, a Sunday sermon, or one of these talks. You can always be notified of getting a podcast from us. And most of you know, if you've been listening to this before, you might not, but FCC Talk is all about talking about current Christian news going on around, the world, and mostly in America, but we sometimes do touch on worldly subjects as well. We do stay out of politics. We don't try to do any politics here, even if a story is maybe about something political. We try not to go that way at all, just because there is so much political media and stuff out there. We don't want to be another sounding board for that. So, if you want political news, there's plenty of places to find it. You're not going to find it very much here. So, Chris, you ready to get into our very first story?
Absolutely. Let's
All
go.
right. Do you know who Randy Gradishar is? The
I
Bronco.
really, I never heard of him before today.
Okay.
Reading, I really hadn't. So that was kind of fascinating.
Well, I was wondering if you did, because I know that you enjoy watching football, but I didn't, you don't follow football quite as closely as some other people do. But Randy Gradishar played for the Denver Broncos in
Yep.
his playing days in the NFL, and he has been inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And when he got up to speak, a lot of guys, when they get up to speak, they kind of thank people and talk about their career and things like that.
Mhm.
Well, when Randy got up to speak, he essentially gave a sermon and shared the gospel with everybody who was there. Talked many times about his faith and salvation. There are some quotes here in the article, and I'll link the article in the description if you want to read it. But he said, "The only way to be right with God and to live out his plan for our life, not ours." So, I mean, very much so. This wasn't just a hey, thanks to God for giving me the gifts and abilities. He went into quite a speech, telling people to follow God and speaking about his salvation. He said, "At age 22, I received Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior." So, giving his own testimonial there a little bit. Chris, I wanted to ask you. So, we've seen athletes praise God with their accomplishments and all kinds of things. But Randy getting up there, I mean, literally sharing the gospel, almost like he was giving a sermon. What does this say about a man who is willing to set aside his own accomplishments to preach the gospel word?
I think that was amazing. Like I said, I not really don't follow linebackers as much as I do like quarterbacks and running backs and other wide receivers on football teams. In fact, because I'm more familiar because of the fantasy sports that we do here at the church than I've ever been. But what I found fascinating is he gave a kind of a detailed idea, four simple truths about salvation. That the first point was that God created mankind in his image. Then the second point was mankind's problem is sinning and falling short of the glory of God. And then third, mankind's sin, God made a way through Christ. And then fourth, that salvation requires turning to God and accepting forgiveness and accepting Christ as Savior. So this is a little bit more than what we're seeing on the Olympics. A lot of Christians that are athletes are giving God glory and praise. But I mean, really, he basically shared the plan of salvation in this moment. And I think that's really, really cool that he gets it to the point of this is bigger than my career. This is bigger than who I am. This is this is has a eternal significance. So I was very impressed by that.
Yeah, I was too. I
Interesting.
mean, like you said, this is different than some people at the Olympics, and I don't want to diminish. Like, I think that's fantastic
Right.
too.
I'm not
I mean,
diminishing it at all.
right. But, just that Randy would be willing to use this opportunity. I mean, you only get one Hall of Fame speech, right? And you're going to
Right.
use this opportunity to preach the gospel rather than talk about yourself and all this stuff. I mean, that's just very, very humbling and
Mhm.
very, just cool to hear about. The ending of his speech, I do want to talk about that here for a second since we brought up all the points and stuff like that. But he said, and so today I dedicate my Pro Football Hall of Fame 2024 induction to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who gave me life so I could be built to last. Thank you and God bless. And then that was it from
Absolutely.
there. So, I mean, just
Pointing people
fantastic.
toward eternity. Right. I mean, that's wild.
Exactly. Exactly. Chris, you tell me what is an example that Randy what is the example that Randy has now set for, not only Christians but athletes? I mean, when you hear this, what does it kind of speak to you personally, and then maybe do you feel like this is going to inspire other athletes to maybe give up their platform and talking about themselves and talk about Christ?
I I think it's a great example. I think that we see it in a variety of ways in the sound bites that they get as much as they can. Like I was watching the Olympics last night, and a sprinter, a female sprinter that was very outspoken for the Lord, and different gold medal winners. I mean, they just give God the glory. But in this moment where he had control of a large segment of time, that's what he did. And so I think we'll see that more, especially with folks that have had the opportunity like he has of reflecting on their whole life and saying, this was God given, this talent that I have, the abilities I have and the good fortune that I've had along the way, that I wasn't uh, injured or hurt dramatically or tragically along my career. I think when you stop and look at it, that's really God and God's grace that has allowed him to be as successful as what he has in National Football League. So I think he's just giving glory to whom glory is due, right?
Yeah. 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 I mean, I totally agree. And, for me, it, challenges me to, not look at what I've done, as a minister, as a father, in any aspect of my life and say, oh, I did this, and, truly recognize it was God giving it to me. I mean, here's this man who
Mhm.
accomplishes something that very few people have ever accomplished, going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I mean, even if you're not a football fan, I think you can recognize
Mhm.
that's a pretty crazy accomplishment. And to just make it all about God and Christ, yeah, it's very encouraging and a great example, I think, from so many people, including myself. All right, Chris, let's talk about our next news subject here. This one's not as positive. I tried to sandwich the negatives with some positive stuff to,
There you go.
brighten people up a little bit. So we'll have one more positive story after this. But Pastor Josiah Anthony engaged in sexual messaging with women. Cross Timbers Church revealed. All right, so
Mhm.
essentially the story here. This is a large church in Texas. There's a lot of there's a lot of large churches in Texas,
Yeah.
but essentially, this pastor he had been talking about how he was, having some mental health issues and things like that, and his sermons kind of used himself as an example. And then he went on a sabbatical. And when he went on a sabbatical, somebody who works in the church office had spoken up and said, "Hey, he's not really being appropriate." And so he was essentially asked to not come back for a little bit, dismissed, and then later, I'm forgetting, Chris, was he fired or did he resign?
I think he was let go. I'm
Okay.
thinking.
I thought he was too, but I wanted to make sure.
I think.
I believe he was let go. And then here lately, news has come out from the church that he was engaging in sexual messaging. They don't believe, they don't consider any of these instances to be emotional affairs because the power dynamics of these interactions were never equal. We do not consider these to be consensual. This behavior will never be tolerated at our church was a statement from the church. So, Chris, as obviously this is a difficult conversation to have talking about this, and we see this far too many times. It's gotten to the point now where when I see stories like this, I don't even know if I always want to put them on here because they're more common than we would like them to be, and I don't want to make every single episode be about a fallen pastor.
Mhm.
However, I found this one interesting because of how the church responded, with really not saying very much at the beginning and then later on, talking more about the situation. I mean, you tell me, Christian, churches continue to be transparent with the media about pastors' struggles and these kind of sensitive topics? Or do you think it's better in a situation like this where maybe you don't talk to the media about it and you just kind of say, yeah, he had some struggles and we've moved on from him? I mean, do you have any praise for how the church acted or criticism for how they acted in your mind?
Well, we got two or three things going on here. First of all, the man has some mental illness or some emotional issues going on right now. And so I think the church was reaching out to him, trying to help him. And through that process, the inappropriate texting, obviously, they dealt with immediately. And then as they found out more things, they had to say, hey, you got to resign. This is inappropriate. And hopefully they're supporting him through his either emotional or mental health crisis throughout the way. But I think you've got to be, it always is hard. It's heartbreaking, first of all, in every situation. Second of all, it's always hard on the churches. And there are people that will become disillusioned with Christianity and give up their walking with God. If this person can't walk with God, if this person can't live in Christ, if this person can't overcome this, then how can I possibly? And they give up. And so it's a demotivator and it's disillusioning. At the same time, you and I are both pastors and we're sinners and we're saved by grace and we sin. Believe it or not, everybody sins, and so do we. And so we have frailties and we should guard against them. But in times with either uh, overran by stress, overran by mental illness, overran by emotional distress, I don't know, or just plain burnout. I think some people in ministry, rather than just saying, hey, I need a timeout and I need to go get another job, they blow up and end up in jail or in the newspaper for something that they do rather than handling it better, because there are times when uh, we aren't in a good place to lead in ministry, and sometimes we need to, like in a basketball game, we need to step out of the way and or well get sit on the bench for a while, and you'll see me do that. The next couple weeks I'm not going to be in the pulpit. I'm not taking a vacation. I'm going to be working on my next series, but it gives me just kind of a breath to, I just preached 9 weeks in a row. That doesn't sound like much, but there's some spiritual battle. There's some things that go on. Sometimes there's drama in church, believe it or not, just like everywhere else. And it gets weary. So I think at times we need to sit the bench and take a breath.
Yeah, I mean, that was exactly what I was gonna get to next is, he had talked about in some of his sermons about some of his mental health issues. Here's an excerpt of something that some of the church was saying. They said Josiah had been open in his preaching about his mental health issues and he suggested his actions were results of his struggles. However, upon further investigation, we discovered that Josiah was not forthcoming or transparent and had a concerning pattern of behavior, communicating inappropriately with women. And just under that, it does say that, he they weren't even aware of his inappropriate sexual messaging when they asked him to resign. They later learned of the sexual communication
Mhm.
going on, but it was mostly. I'll just read the quote here. It says, "Excessively personal and overtly familiar with a former staff member." So, yeah, I mean, this was just a troubling situation, and obviously, we wish for just Josiah to get well, especially with his mental health struggles and things like that. But Chris, my question to you is, we're ministers, and you know, me, I don't preach every single week like you do, but if a minister is willing to admit, hey, I have some mental health struggles going on right now, whether that be anxiety, whether it be stress, whatever it could be. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a ton of
yeah,
them out there. If a pastor is forthcoming to say, hey, I'm struggling with this right now, do you believe that the elders or maybe the ministers around him, if he's, blessed enough to have other people on staff that can help him, should they say, hey, take some time, get away, maybe just stop preaching for a little bit, maybe just stop coming to the office for a little bit, whatever that might be, take
right,
some time, get away, and go kind of get yourself right, however long that might take. Do
right.
you think that is appropriate for churches to do?
Absolutely. Our church doesn't really practice a formal sabbatical. I've worked to try to help get our guys some sabbatical time, but for me, like I've ministered for, I'm in my 41st year of ministry, never had a sabbatical. And I found at times that I was burnt out. Maybe I wasn't healthy and I played hurt and worked through some emotional problems because that just wasn't available at the time. But I definitely think that we need to build in gaps for people in ministry, especially going through difficult times. I think, we saw the great bailout in ministry during COVID. It was just already hard, and then COVID hit, and a lot of people weren't ready for it. Fortunately for us, we had some things in line, and we had some capabilities that we placed intentionally because we were going to be online anyway. But because we had made those plans ahead of time, even though uh, a lot of people didn't think they were necessary at the time, lo and behold, through that year space of COVID or 2 years of COVID, we were there. But if you weren't already there, then I mean, it was awful. It was just awful. And I saw, you know, guys that didn't have any moral failure. They weren't texting and having, sexual whatever affairs or emotional affairs, but they were bailing because, hey, I can't do this. And it was just distressing. So,
There's a lot of pastors out there that will say now, like, COVID was the most difficult years of ministry that I ever had,
right. Like for
once
me, that
everything
was,
turned upside down.
yeah, for me, that was one of the most difficult times in ministry that I'd ever lived through. Now, by faith, am I stronger because of it? And are we stronger because of it? Absolutely. But fortunately, by the grace of God, we were kind of prepared for it. Not that we were thinking, hey, we need to get the internet set up and we need to have the Wi-Fi at a commercial level. And by the way, we're going to have cameras and things. We were already doing that. We were already ready for that. We were already
Right.
podcasting. So we had some things in line by the grace of God, but it wasn't because we thought there was going to be this grand pandemic. It was because, hey, this was just another way that we could reach the gospel, but we were investing significant. We probably had what, ten to $20,000 invested as a church, which was a large investment for our church at the time to be able to do what we do. So,
Yeah. No, I mean, I remember literally 4 months before everything shut down in 2020, we had done our first like live broadcast, and we were just broadcasting the sermons at that time. We weren't even messing with the music because we knew that
right,
was a whole other animal. And so we were like, well, let's slowly work into this, and then it's like, bam, here we go.
There we go. And
You better
remember,
be able to do an entire.
you and I were climbing through the attic at the time, trying to figure out how to get Ethernet cable through the church to where it needed to be to hook it up. And we were doing that ourselves, what, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months before all this was happening, because we had to have the infrastructure. And then we had somebody who actually said, hey, how do I set this up? As at the beginning of the pandemic, because they weren't ready for any of it.
Yeah. No,
First of all, you got to have the internet speed.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's what you had to have, and it was always interesting to me when people would, talk to us and say, "Hey, my picture's really blurry. What are you doing wrong?" And it's like, well, it might not be us.
Right.
So it was a whole
Right.
new world
Right.
where people were saying, "Hey, the church must be doing something wrong because my picture is blurry at home." And it says, "Well, how much internet do you have? Because it might
Right.
not actually be the church's."
Right. No.
But yeah, just a crazy, crazy experience. I tend to agree with the mental health stuff with the pastors. I think it's hard because I think a lot of people view jobs working in a church like everybody else's job, right? I mean, if you're a construction worker, you don't get Tuesday off because, you're having some mental health struggles that day. You're still expected to
Right.
be there. You're still expected to go do the work and stuff like that. And, I think not for me to like tell anybody how hard our jobs are. I just think jobs are different
Right.
and that there is a mental health aspect to working in a church, especially being a minister in a church and leading, and especially for the person who is essentially pouring their heart out every single Sunday, whether that be you or if somebody else was a preaching minister or whatever else. I mean, it's difficult. I mean,
Mhm.
what's the stat you told me? Like preaching hour-long sermon is like working an 8-hour day or something
Right.
like that.
Well, I don't preach hour-long sermons, and
No,
everybody's
I know you
probably
don't.
rejoicing at that. But typically mine are what, 20, 25, maybe 30 minutes. But they say
Yeah, but you
one sermon
preach
is like
two. So
working 8 hours. And so you preach two sermons and you're in your zone and you're totally focused and on, it's like working 8 hours. So two sermons is about 16 hours. Most of the time after church on Sunday morning, I'm in a vegetative state. And I just say, if I'm out with people and we're doing dinner or something like that, and typically I don't do a lot of that because I'm not good company. I don't want to engage in conversation. I don't want to try to deal with any deep or hard issues. Typically on Sunday, a lot of Sunday afternoons that my grandkids were making fun of me. I went swimming with them this last Sunday afternoon, and they said, Pop won't probably be there because he'll be taking his nap. And a good Sunday, I'm taking a nap. I rest on Saturday. Saturday's kind of my Sabbath to prepare for Sunday. And if I'm not rested from Saturday, then I'm not going to perform well, preach well on Sunday. And then after I preach on Sunday, I'm exhausted. And so I'm not Mr. Chatty after that. I'm just done. So, and most guys are, and most resignations occur on Monday because maybe a guy feels like it wasn't a good Sunday. He didn't do a good job. And so most resignations occur on Monday.
yeah,
So
yeah. I am thankful that our church does have 4 full-time, five ministers here on
right,
staff that, when you do feel like you need a Sunday off or something like that, one of us can relatively easily just pop in
right. Yeah.
and preach.
And that's what we're going to do
So,
for the next couple of weeks is you guys are going to preach and I'm going to try to work through some administrative stuff as well as uh, plan our fall preaching schedule and um, do the research for the next few sermons that are coming up. So
but
it's not like
not
I'm not
and
working. Yeah. I'm preaching
right.
the last, I don't know when this is going to be released, but this coming weekend, I'm going to be preaching the last in the worship series. And so I'm really excited about preaching about that
Yep.
and this fall
All right.
series. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. All right, Chris, let's get to our last news topic here. Coming move of God. 2,000 people baptized during Jesus Revolution baptism at a California beach. So there's this church out in California, Harvest, let's see, Harvest Christian Church. Maybe that's what it's called. Their ministry is called Harvest Crusade. And essentially, this church was planning a baptism Sunday, and they had such a large amount that they have taken their baptism Sunday to the beach, and they were baptizing people at the beach. The minister's name is Lori. Still can't find the last
Yeah,
name on
Greg
here. I don't know if
Laurie.
they put the Greg
Greg
Lori.
Laurie.
Okay. Oh, okay, I saw that. After Evangelist Greg Laurie, 2024 Harvest Crusade was attended by thousands of people. I mean, this is just an incredible thing to see thousands of people baptized at one time. I saw something like this when I did camp teams for KCU. We did an event, oh, I think it was called Jesus and the Beach or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, it was the large CIY gathering that they did for um, the large church in Louisville,
Southeast.
Southern,
Yeah,
yeah,
Southeast.
Southeast Christian Church.
Yep.
They essentially CIY puts on an entire camp for them down in Florida at the beach, and
Mm-hmm.
so at the end of every single week, all the kids who wanted to be baptized, they would take them to the beach and they would do all the baptisms there. There wouldn't be thousands, but there would be generally close to 100. I think there was, if I'm remembering correctly, just barely over 100 the year we were there. And so it is a pretty cool event, and it's pretty neat to see,
Mm-hmm.
especially people walking out into the water and being baptized, all that stuff. Chris, Lori was talking about this event in his interview with the media, and he said that he believes it may be the indicative of a coming move of God that will sweep our land. Chris, do you believe the same as Lori that there will be a coming move of God to sweep our land, and this is kind of a precursor for that?
Well, all I can say is I hope so. There have been different awakenings in our church history. And if you remember, I think it was last year or the year before that they were down at, what's the seminary near,
Oh, yeah, I remember
Lexington. They had
I tell you this in a minute.
The Asbury
Yeah,
revival, and
yep.
all of that was going on. The move of the Spirit at Asbury. I think our nation is ripe for a revival and or an awakening. I think we're seeing when we lift God up, when uh, people see Jesus lifted up, people are drawn to Him. Now, Greg Laurie is well-known preacher. He is in a mega church, and so 2,000 people on the West Coast in that environment isn't that large because they probably don't do baptisms every week. They probably schedule them once a year. I know that Willow Creek had hundreds of baptisms because they only did them like one. There was a baptism Sunday every year, and so they did that. We practice that when you come to faith, just like in the book of Acts, you get baptized nearly immediately or as soon as possible. That's just what we see as precedent in Scripture. But I do think there is a move of the Spirit, and when Jesus is lifted up and people get it by the mystery of God, that's going on. I think that I'm going to be preaching about the Middle East here in a couple weeks on Labor Day Sunday and about Israel and all of that going on. I mean, Israel right now is surrounded, I mean, basically by people that don't like them. And most of them are Iranian based non-governmental organizations. And so that's kind of looking like Armageddon a little bit to me. It may or may not be. I'm not, Jesus didn't know, and neither do I. God hasn't revealed this to me. But we could be at the end of the days, or the like what in Second Thessalonians, as well as when we're preaching First Thessalonians, is there is the end of days, and we're ever getting nearer. And so we got to be aware of what's going on in the world. And so I think that in the latter days, people are going to come to Christ, and this could be it. I don't want to, I guess I do want to say, hey, you should be alarmed if you're not right with God. And at the same time, it's always,
no,
huh?
I know what you mean. I mean, I have had people ask me before, do you think, the end days are coming? And I
Right.
say, well, I don't know, but you better be ready because it could happen at this point. Jesus said
Right.
you don't even know.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't think you should be looking for signs and say, oh, better get right with God now. I think it's probably safer if you're just always right with God. It's like, how
Right.
I mean, it's like your finances, right? You always want to have a savings account with money set aside just in
Right.
case something happens. Well,
Let's
you
be
always want to
ready.
be right with God just in case the end days come and it's
Right.
time,
Right. Right.
here it
And
is.
maybe
So,
our end of day, not the eternal end of day for everyone, but our end of day.
right.
But
Exactly. Either way.
again, I
But
think, we're on the verge. We could be on the verge of World War III, but again, I hope not, but it could be. So we need to live ready and also share with people. Hey, here are some indicators. I don't know if it is or not because, I've read books about how Gorbachev was the Antichrist and Jesus was coming in 1985. So that's 40 years ago. So I think somebody missed it there. And again, but we always have these cycles of this, but eventually it's going to be the end of days.
yeah, it will be eventually.
Mm.
Chris, back to the story for just a second. So I know, we talked about what our church practices when it comes to baptism. When
Mhm.
you come to Christ, you are received and baptized. We try to do it as quickly as possible. Sometimes we wait for family members to be there and stuff like that, but
Right.
generally we don't practice a baptism Sunday or something like that. We've done it before in the past,
Right.
but it's not what we generally
Right.
practice. There has
We
been some. Oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was going to say there has been some concern in the past for these type of Sundays where somebody comes to Christ and then you're telling them, oh, wait X amount of months and then you can get baptized when everybody else does. So I'm just curious with people criticizing these baptism Sundays when they make people wait. How do you personally feel about these events of mass baptisms and trying to get people to
Mhm.
all kind of do it together and making an event out of it?
Right. Well, I think that sometimes it's great. Different. We don't overemphasize baptism, but we extend an invitation every Sunday morning for people to come to Christ. And that's intentional. I think that sometimes if we don't extend an invitation, we're missing that moment where someone is open. There was a time where we didn't practice an invitation at the end of every service, and I had someone who wanted to come to the Lord and wanted to be baptized. So there wasn't an opportunity in that worship service for that to happen, and so basically we had to say, "Hey, can we do something to be able to build this into this service?" They want to come forward. So, and we did. But every Sunday is an opportunity for someone to come to Christ. Now, those big baptism events, we did one and it worked really well, and we might do another one, but it's not programmed. And for mega churches, they there are times where they preach a sermon on baptism and say, "Hey, if you're ready, let's go now." And so people kind of get caught up in that moment and actually are baptized. And I don't see anything wrong with that as long as there's a solid Bible base. And what I was impressed with Greg Lowry is that these people had previously made the decision for Christ. Maybe some of them made it on the spot on the beach there, but what they laid in, they were counseled, they were led, they understood what they were doing, and they were baptized. And I think that's the way to do it. I don't know a lot about I try to look up Greg Lowry on Wikipedia and on WBGL, a local Christian radio station. Every once in a while there'll be an excerpt from his sermon. I think he's a Bible preacher, but I just don't know a lot about him, so I cannot endorse him or say I know a lot about him. I don't. But from what the appearance of what I've read in the article and what I've heard is he's a very biblically based preacher. So, and that's what you want to be.
We can, right. We can give our opinions on stuff, but at the end of the day, I mean, we would hope that most people would be biblically knowledgeable enough that they would be able to determine that for themselves. And if you're not, we would still love to help, but we can't answer about every single person off the
Right.
cuff. Yeah, I think there's pros and cons when it comes to the baptism events. I'm with you that kind of the counseling of it is really good to me. That's something that I like to do with children when they come and say that they're ready to get baptized. Obviously, if the parent says they're ready and they want to do it right away, I'll go for it.
Right.
But if the parent is saying, "Hey, I want them to talk to you. I want them to really know what this means," because my biggest fear is always that somebody is going to get baptized and then 5 years down the road they're going to say, well, I didn't really know what I was doing, so I does my baptism count? Not necessarily do I need to be baptized again, but they're questioning, did it count? Am I really saved? And I don't want anybody to ever feel that kind of questioning. Because we should be confident in our baptism and Jesus saving us. And so I do practice that, not because I want to get a Sunday planned where there's, a bunch of baptisms that impress people, but more so because I want to make sure that anybody who is getting baptized understands what they're doing and they're making a good and sound decision, which sometimes if somebody comes up on a Sunday morning and you've not talked to that person a bunch, you don't know that person very well, it can be hard. I mean, I'm sure you've been there before, Chris, where
Mhm.
it can be hard to know, is this person doing it for the right reasons? Do they know? Do they understand? I'm just going to have to trust God that He led this person, to do this, and He's going to take care of it afterward. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to FCC Talk today. We appreciate it. Chris, is there anything going on with preaching or ministry or anything like that you want to address before we get out of here? Or anything you want to tell people about that's coming up or anything like that? You mentioned your
Well,
sermon series on Timothy and stuff, but
right. I'm super excited about what's happening in our church right now. As a result, people almost every week we have people joining, we have people being baptized, we have people guests all the time. And so we're really in a great season by the grace of God. And when you say, is this the second coming? Is this a spiritual awakening? I don't know. But all I can know is that God is doing a great work. And so I'm super excited about that. I'm looking forward to the fall and this next sermon series. And the gathering in our church is very vibrant right now. I think the worship services and things are very vibrant, and we're getting to do a lot of things that I never thought we'd be able to do. And so I just think, hey, if you're listening and you're in the area or in our region, you're welcome to come and join us.
totally agree. Thanks so much, Chris, for being here and being a part of FCC Talk. Thank you to everybody who's listening out there. Like I said, if you're on YouTube, please do like and subscribe. Let us know if you have any thoughts on anything that we shared. If you have any comments, we would love to hear from you. And also, if you're listening on podcast, please do subscribe over there as well, so that way you can get all of our podcasts. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.
See you.